Hey parents, it's actually late at night. It's 3:23 a.m. Um, because that's the only time I had to make this video. So, making a video about why the 16-hour training week and what about this schedule is beneficial and how is it that it's not going to be detrimental to your daughter trying to achieve her goal. Um, so first off, I want to address the issue of more hours versus less hours and why all the changes happen kind of in a coaching philosophy. Um, in the past, we wanted more hours because we wanted to give everyone as much opportunity as possible to kind of have no excuse for not being able to achieve their goal. So we didn't want to tell somebody, gee, if you only would have come 20 hours a week, you would have learned faster. So we had this initial hypothesis that the more hours I give somebody, the more opportunities they're going to take, and then they're going to grow and adapt faster. The truth is that that's not actually real. It doesn't play out that way. Not everyone adapts the same way, and so you give someone more hours does not necessarily mean they're going to learn any faster. And I'll get more into why this is. So, one aspect was we didn't want to take away opportunities, so we wanted to offer as many hours as possible. But now we're seeing that even if you are given a lot of hours, it doesn't mean you're going to use them wisely or even push or challenge yourself any more than you would with less hours. So there's an adaptation problem. The other side of it is as coaches, most of the coaches who are cranking out the top level athletes in the country in gymnastics, they're in their 40s, their 50s, their 60s. And so some of it is saturation of experience. There's just the less hours you put in, the less experience you have as a coach. So one element is the more hours we have going, then the more experience as coaches we get. And so we've really kind of super concentrated our exposure to the sport so that we could develop ourselves as coaches. And so it has been a benefit, and you can say educational wise, for us coaches that we had athletes going 20 hours a week, and a lot of them because we got to see how people adapt and what are the mile markers that we need to be looking for to make sure that progress is still happening in an athlete's career. So more hours was beneficial for us on an educational level. More hours was also required by us because we did not fully understand the entire spectrum of the sport. Because with gymnastics, every level you have to learn new things. And if we don't have a level 9 gymnast, we don't know what it takes to get to level 9. If we don't have a level 10 gymnast, and we don't know what it takes to get to level 10. We can say, yeah, book-wise, knowledge-based, we know what it takes. But the experience of actually pushing an athlete to that level is a thing that you can just not talk about. You have to experience and feel and kind of understand how do the adaptations of that athlete transform into becoming the level that they're trying to achieve. And so we needed the amount of time and education to understand what is it required, what's the requirements for an athlete to really get to that level. So more hours was a benefit for us in that way because now we've been able to push the spectrum much farther and we have a better vision. So now why are we wanting to decrease hours? Why are we promoting this 16-hour work week essentially? Why is it that you're going to go to a competition and sit next to parents who have a daughter who's going 30 hours a week or 20 hours a week or 25, and they say that they're going so many hours almost in a way of I don't know, you could say boasting about their accomplishments, a pat on their back, like we're accomplishing so much with so much more. And the truth is they're not. We need to really be careful with what we think actually is beneficial and what is actually pushing the limits to being detrimental to a child. Um, and so I'm definitely someone who's a proponent of pushing limits. I like to know what the limits are. I love pushing the limits. That's what makes me decent at what I do. But there's a danger with it as well. And so more hours also has consequences. And they're not always physical consequences, they can be emotional too. And so I think that there's some things to be understood there as well. Now, the ultimate training plan for any athlete should be get the most out of your workout with the least amount of working out. Like, you don't want to actually train more. You want to train the least amount possible to get the most result. That's really what you're trying to do. So if you have to put in more training to get the same result as somebody else who's putting in less training, then you're actually tearing your body down unnecessarily. And so the better question should be is, why are you having to go more hours? Not are more hours more beneficial? And if you're having to go more hours, then that means that you're beating your body up more. And you're also emotionally beating yourself up more, because a training session is really pushing yourself to a limit that your body's not wanting to be at. And so you're having to push beyond your state of comfort. And so to do more hours is basically saying, hey, let's be uncomfortable for a longer period of time, as if that's healthy and going to get you where you want to go. And it's not. Not if you don't want it. Um, I would say in gymnastics, different than, let's say, weightlifting, the biggest hurdles to overcome are fear. And so if you don't want to overcome your fear, you're just going to come into the gym every single day being afraid and dealing with the same issue. And and we can talk about self-esteem, which is a huge factor in our sport, is you're dealing with girls, young girls, and they're dealing with self-esteem issues. And here every single day they're facing their fears and failing because all they do is come in and avoid them. They just go, oh, I'm afraid of that, so I'm not going to do it today. And then what do they get is they get the kind of the heat of their coaches coming on them when it's like, okay, you've been avoiding this thing for so long. Why aren't you doing anything about it? You need to step up and actually push yourself to your limit. And that's just not comfortable. That's not a comfortable position to be in. And really, that takes maturity. And so going more hours a week doesn't necessarily increase maturity. It doesn't speed up the developmental process of a human being. The silly thing is, and I think as a parent, you might want to really consider this. And as I'm getting further and further into the sport of gymnastics, I am understanding um, how kind of cautiously we need to move forwards in understanding what our real attainable goals is the idea that your daughter's probably not adapting fast enough as a human being for what they're trying to achieve. And what I mean by this is, it doesn't matter if your kid is a super talented, physically capable athlete, if they're emotionally not ready to throw the skill, if they're not mentally mature enough to handle the responsibility of the skill, then it's just going to destroy their body. Like, there's no way around it. You can't take somebody and say, hey, you're 11 years old, go throw some double backflips, and not think that there's going to be no consequences. The impact forces, the amount of energy involved. I mean, these things are things that kids are not thinking about. They have no they're not holding themselves accountable. They're not writing down. They don't know how, okay, I landed this one wrong, or I under rotated this one, or did my takeoff wrong. Like, they're not keeping track of any of the components of the skills that they're throwing. And that is what is the problem. Is going more hours is great if you are going more hours more accurately, and you are going more hours with the intention of overcoming those barriers. But if you're not doing that, if you're going more hours and staying at the status quo, like there's no actual physical change or improvement, then you're not actually benefiting yourself. You're actually tearing yourself down. And you're going to feel that much later on. So part of it is looking out for the longevity of the athletes and really looking into, how do we create a system that matches the maturity level of the athlete. And we've made mistakes, and we've had shortcomings in pushing athletes beyond their maturity level and pushing for things beyond what a human body is developed for. And that's because there isn't a limiting factor. Like, you can go throw a double backflip on the floor, and there's nothing that tells you the kid isn't strong enough. I mean, you go, okay, well, they can do it. They must be strong enough, and that's not true. And so the problem being is that if a person lands wrong, they're breaking their body down. And how many times do they land wrong a day? And then how many times are they supposed to hold themselves accountable? We're talking about kids here who can't consistently clean their room or can't consistently wash their dishes. And so you're thinking they're going to consistently land that double back the way they're supposed to. It's just not going to happen. And so we're putting people in a precarious situation where we're thinking, okay, yeah, my kid's fine. They're hurling their body through the air at max velocity and everything's going to work out great. And it's like, no, it's not. It's not going to work out great. Not if they aren't being intentional with it. And so how do we match more hours with the maturity level of the athlete? That's where you have to find kind of that symbiosis. You shouldn't be 12 years old going 30 hours a week with lack of consciousness and maturity to land the skills and lack of accountability. I mean, it's just not going to work out. So there's an honest check that needs to happen, and that is that not every person is ready to go more hours. It's just not healthy or safe. So in that being said, I don't think an athlete trying to go, uh, anything less than probably, I don't know, and I don't think anyone really who's below level 8 gymnastics needs to go more than 16 hours a week. I mean, we've gotten our efficiency program down to where we're not missing anything. We're getting all the conditioning we need. We're getting all the flexibility we need. We can get improvements in every area of their gymnastics with the amount of time offered in 16 hours. There's literally no reason to go more if you are below level 8 gymnastics. You could say, well, they need one more opportunity. They need one more day to throw that back handspring on a high beam, or one more day to throw a giant, or one more day to throw something. And the honest answer is no, they don't. They really don't. If a person is not going to do it out of the patterns that we've seen, they're just not going to do it. And one more day doesn't make the difference. The better question is, when are they going to wake up and show up in the gym and just do it? And that's not going to change based off of the hours offered. Okay, the difference between saying, okay, I come 4 days a week, and let's just say it's Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Okay, the difference of saying, well, I need Saturday, so I get one more day to throw my back handspring on a high beam, versus just come in Monday and throw your back handspring on a high beam. And we're talking a 2-day difference, and that's not going to change anything. So you're not going to throw the back handspring Saturday, and you're not going to throw the back handspring on Monday. So the Saturday is irrelevant because you're not throwing it on Monday, and you're not throwing it on Thursday, and you're not throwing. So the problem is not more hours. The problem is the level of intent the athlete has in actually accomplishing the task at hand. That's actually what the problem is. The problem is not lack of capability. All of our athletes are more than capable to throw the skills that we are requiring or asking of them, and majority of the slowdown comes to fear and lack of maturity to want to learn how to do the skill properly, to execute it consistently. So it's a maturity issue and it's a fear-based issue. It's not a workload kind of problem. It is not a conditioning issue. It is not a flexibility problem. We have enough time to get flexibility in to the point that if one of our athletes is not flexible, it's because they're not taking their flexibility serious enough. We actually do flexibility a lot, and they're probably, I don't know, I would want to say accomplishing in a week of 16 hours, probably close to 3 hours worth of flexibility, if not more, maybe closer to 4 hours of that time. Is 4 or 5 hours can be closer to that time of flexibility training. And so if they're not getting flexible in 16 hours, they're not getting flexible in 20, because the amount of time that they're putting towards it is enough to see results. And those that are actually applying themselves are actually getting results. Strength conditioning wise, our strength conditioning program has improved to the point that you don't need to come 20 hours a week to get any stronger. We're getting results in 16 hours, and we've got it dialed in to where there's the workloads and the balance of how is everything's working. Is if you're applying yourself, you will get stronger in 16 hours. You don't need to come the 20. So the only reason why 20 hours would be beneficial is if you're having to pull off the flips, the double flipping kind of stuff, the more dangerous flips, and you need to put more numbers in the air and actually get the double flipping in the air. But if you're at a base level, which is lower than level 8, and you're really doing single flipping kind of things, which you can do on all surfaces, there's not a limitation, then you're actually getting enough of everything in because everything correlates so nicely. The thing about gymnastics, what we're doing is correlating all the events. And so you have vault, you have floor, you have beam. There's a lot of similarities. They all have back handsprings on them, all have front handsprings on them. So the athlete below level 8 is getting opportunities to throw enough back handsprings, even if they might be on just different surfaces. But once you get past level 8 gymnastics and you're really pushing I need to get a double back flip, I need to get a double front flip, an Arabian double front, then you need to spend more time on a trampoline, more time going into the air and hurling yourself into the foam pit because you can't throw those skills on all the surfaces. And so because of that limitation, more hours is necessary because of your lack of capability to throw those skills on all the surfaces. But below level 8, there isn't really a reason to go more than 16 hours. Now, if your vision is to go elite and you're like, I want to go elite, the truth is as we're learning and we're taking Bella to these elite compulsory routines competitions, if you don't have level 8 gymnastics, you shouldn't even be thinking about wanting to go elite. That shouldn't even be on the table. What some gyms are doing is they're doing these elite compulsory competitions just so that they can say they have elites. And so they're using it as a branding more than it is actual elite qualification. They're not passing even elite qualifiers. They're just saying they have elites because they're competing in the competitions. And so I would say that really if you want your child or if your child has a vision or goal to go elite, then you should be really asking the question, do they have level 8 gymnastics on all 4 events? And if they do not, then that is what the first milestone should be achieved, is get level 8 gymnastics on all 4 events. Then let's worry about talking about going elite. Now, we wouldn't have known this and come to this understanding if we didn't have at least 3 people who wanted to go elite, and we pushed those limits and we saw what we needed to do and we got educated on the subject and we pursued after all the information, and then we go, okay, so this is what really matters. Now, give you some more perspective about gymnastics as a whole. Hopefully what I'm saying is making sense. But we're sitting in a round table meeting in Las Vegas at a gymnastics clinic that we took Bella, Arva, and Jaden to. It's an elite gymnastics clinic. And we have Tammy Biggs, Neil Resnick, Ivanov, and they're the national coaching staff. And we're in this round table meeting, and they're just talking about gymnastics. And Neil Resnick says, because the question kind of comes up with how should you do your hours, and Tammy Biggs says, anyone who says they're doing 2-a-days, which means that you come in the morning and you work out for 4 hours, and then you come back in the afternoon and you work out for 4 hours. She's like, anyone who says they're doing 2-a-days is lying. She says they're not. Nobody is doing 2-a-days the way that it is said in the program or what they even say. She says, I know, I go to their gym and I see what they're doing, and they're not doing 2-a-days. Now, they might go into the gym at those amount of time, but they're not actually working out as hard or how they should be. So then Neil kind of tags along on this concept, and he says, the elite training model, where you're doing 2-a-days or 36 hours a week, the elite training model is built around the idea that there is an athlete who can do 8 hours of gymnastics a day and want to do 30 minutes more and never be injured, never be hurt. Everything's great. He said that's basically 1% of the 1%. He's like, nobody fits this model. So here now we are trying to take people who do not fit this type of person and cram them into a system that was designed for the 1% of the 1%. Again, it's called elite for a reason. It's the 1% of the 1%. So it's like, to me, when I think of the highest level athletes, and then we're trying to make everybody follow that model, to me, that's not really the smartest plan, nor is it wise or responsible on our part. So we need to really take into account that we don't have athletes that fit the model of the 1% of the 1%. I mean, we don't. An unfortunate coaching joke that coaches laugh about, and I really don't find it funny, but I'm presenting it to you to understand I want to say the naivety that coaches have in understanding how to get somebody to the highest level of gymnastics is they ask the question, well, what happens when an athlete gets injured or feels pain? We all know that when the girls go through their hormonal changes and their growth spurts, that they start getting more injury and they can't control their body the same way. And so there's more pain. And so this question gets proposed in this roundtable meeting. What happens when the athlete feels more pain? And the response is, find another athlete. So the answer that we're getting from the top coaches in the country, and not just the top coaches in the country, but the coaches that are coaching the top coaches in the country, okay? Because this clinic we're at their gymnast, the host gymnast Miley O'Keefe, was the national champion. So here we have the coaches of a national champion and the coaches that helped them get to this national championship saying, if you have an athlete that feels pain, find another athlete. Okay, so now what's the consequences of this type of statement is you teach your athletes not to complain about pain. Because if they have pain, you're going to find another one. So now you have a bunch of gymnasts running around not complaining about pain because they know that if they do, they're going to get passed up. That's not healthy, okay? And that is not what we're trying to achieve. So the other side of it is we have coaches that don't know how to train people through their pain. So here's a sport where people are not trying to say, okay, let's figure out a way to get to the top while being average, let's say. There's not really a roadmap for those people. And so in some ways, you just have to be genetically inclined to dominate the sport, or there really isn't any information or help for you out there in the coaching sphere. And so a lot of the stuff we're doing is pioneering a way to say, okay, we know that your daughter is not the 1% of the 1%, but we're still going to work just as hard as if they were, and we're going to find a way to help them achieve their goal. But the reality is, there isn't a lot of information to understand that process. And the reality is that the way of getting there is only a training model that fits for the 1% of the 1%. And honestly, there's nobody in our gym that qualifies for that. I can't tell you if there's ever been a girl that can, in our gym, or an athlete in our gym that's been able to push hard enough to go elite and never feel pain. That's just not realistic. So, what is the plan? Well, the plan is to not be foolish in the way that we do things. That's the plan. Let's put it in a different perspective. What sport do kids do that 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds are required to execute their playing ability at a college level? There isn't a sport where 13-year-olds are expected to compete at a collegiate level like gymnastics. Like you could take a 13-year-old in basketball and they could be a rock star, and you put them against a college player and they'll get smoked. They just won't win. There's not even, you can't even contend, right? Take a 13-year-old baseball, softball player and put them against a college level player. They can't contend. It's not even close. You can do any sport. I mean, really, what sport out there do 13-year-olds do just as well as college level athletes. Like it doesn't exist. You can't find a 13-year-old MMA fighter that's going to be just as good as a collegiate level MMA fighter. You can't find a badminton player at 13 who's going to be as good as a collegiate level badminton player. Like it's just not going to happen. And yet in gymnastics, we are requiring 13-year-olds to execute gymnastics at a collegiate level when they haven't even grown and developed as a human being to get to the maturity to be there. And that is just silly. Like, yeah, good job for that 12-year-old who's, an elite. Congratulations to her. But either one, she's a freak phenomena, or two, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and that's not a happy, healthy child. And I think those are two very, very important things we got to take into consideration. So that is why we're pursuing the 16-hour training load work week, essentially, is saying if you're below level 8, you don't need to go more than 16 hours. It really isn't emotionally, mentally, or physically beneficial in any way. What needs to happen is if you want more success out of your athlete, you need to be sitting down with your daughter and saying, why is it that you're not achieving your goals in the time that is allotted to you? The other thing is, if your athlete is wanting to go elite, you're like, I want to go elite, that's our plan. That's great. But you need to be asking your daughter, what are you achieving every single day that makes you so special that you should be going elite at this age? Because elite level gymnastics is beyond college level gymnastics. Okay, so let's keep this in perspective. Tom Brady is in his 40s and he's at the top of his career, essentially, in his 40s. And you want your 13-year-old daughter to be at the top of her career when she's 15, 16, or even 18. How old was Michael Jordan when he was at the top? It wasn't high school and it wasn't college. So how old was Lance Armstrong? How old was whoever else? It certainly was beyond college years that they became at the top of their career in their 30s, late 20s, 30s. So we're requiring children to be at the top of their career before they hit 18, and we think that that's an obtainable, achievable goal. It's not. It's not. There is no girl in our gym who wants to work hard enough to be at the top of their career by the time they're 16, 17, 18. Nobody in our gym wants to work that hard. And nobody in most people's gym wants to work that hard. It's not that our girls are bad, but you go look at any other gym, you can go drive around the country and go see them. There is not a lot of girls in gyms that are wanting to be at the top of their career by the time they're 16, 17. They might say they do, but they don't want to work that hard. And then we could get further into why don't people want to work that hard. I have a lot of thoughts on that. But that's the reason why we want to cut down the number of hours in our training work week, because of the lack of desire from the girls to actually be at the top of their game. They're not utilizing their time wisely enough, and all it's doing is becoming detrimental to their growth. And so until they're going to utilize their time more wisely, they don't need more of it. They just need to mature as human beings. And we're probably going to see a higher level success from a 17-year-old than we are from a 13-year-old. Just what we're going to see, because they can comprehend things and care and take more responsibility for their actions, and they can just understand much better. And we're going to probably see better from an 18-year-old, and we'll probably see better from a 19. And it's just going to probably go on. I mean, the idea that you should be at the top of your career in gymnastics by the time you graduate high school is silly. It is really silly to me. And so to think that you're going to get to elite before you've even passed college aged years, I mean, we've got to have like a super special type of person to even consider that, is what I'm seeing. And that is where they use the word luck. It's like you get lucky if you get an elite, in the sense of Olympic level elite, because nobody really wants to work that hard. And I think that's a realistic um, perspective. I would love it if everybody wanted to work that. I would love it if every single one of the girls wanted to go elite and they all wanted to work that hard. But the truth is they don't. And so while I have spent many years trying to force people into a box that they do not fit in, um, all it has done is created more friction and conflict over the years, and it's not been beneficial for anybody. So what we're trying to do is eliminate as much friction and conflict and look out for the benefit of the athletes and look out for their health, both all of it, emotionally, mentally, and physically, and really create a pathway that makes sense. And so that's why we were wanting to change the workout hours. We also think it's beneficial that group 3 and 4 train together, that group 3 doesn't go to Paso on Tuesday and group 4 is in Atascadero on Tuesday and they're separate from each other. We see a benefit to keep them together. It helps for the coach camaraderie because as coaches, when we're just teaching a group by ourselves with no other coaches around, you kind of lose a little bit of the spark, the fire to keep pushing things harder, to keep the girls engaged. Um, and so having another coach on site and being able to kind of swap groups and say, okay, I'm taking group 3 for an hour, and then I get group 4 for an hour, like that type of stuff. That change up really helps keep the motivation going and the energy level going, and because it's a lot to be trying to push people to constantly be overcoming their fear and nobody doing anything, and knowing that this is a process that is just repeated day in and day out until they wake up one day and want to throw those skills. So that's my story. It's 30 something minutes long. I hope I tried to make it actually shorter. I did this video once before and it came out to be 30 minutes, but I think this one's better. So hopefully you understand everything that I'm saying. Hopefully you understand that we're coming from a place of care and concern and love for your child, and we want them to be happy, healthy human beings, and we want to have a realistic expectation on how to achieve the highest level of gymnastics, and we need to do it in a methodical way that makes sense, that does not tear people down and break down their bodies so that they don't have the longevity of the sport. So that's where we're coming from. So if you have any questions, reach out to us. Let us know what your feedback is. But other than that, we're going to still keep pushing forwards the best we possibly can and keep the mindset that every single one of the girls has what it takes to get to their goal. I believe that. I don't think that you have to be in the 1% of the 1% to achieve the Olympics. I don't think that's what happens. But I do think you need to have a support system, and I do think you need to be having a methodical thought process and plan to get there. And I think it takes a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of failure. And I don't know if everybody wants to go down that journey. So with that being said, let's make it successful for everyone, and let's really be responsible for how we move forwards in this crazy sport of gymnastics that is not very clear on how to get your goal achieved. So thank you. Hope you guys all have a great day, and I'm going back to sleep.